Dubai still delivers a compelling proposition. It offers zero income tax, seamless round-the-clock efficiency, and a cosmopolitan lifestyle that fuses Eastern charm with Western sophistication.
From the 148th floor of the Burj Khalifa, Dubai looks perfect. Glass towers, highways flowing like light, islands shaped like palm trees. Every corner screams ambition. But down in the streets, the story is different. Empty corridors, shuttered shops, lobbies built for thousands now quiet. It's not collapse, but it isn't the dream either. What happens when a city built on imagination starts to feel ordinary? And who decides whether the dream can still hold? Something subtle is shifting beneath the gold and glass. The question is no longer whether Dubai survives. It's whether it can remain the city it promised the world. Dubai's audacious rise. To understand what might be changing in Dubai, you first have to understand what Dubai achieved. Because what it achieved was, by any objective measure, one of the most extraordinary acts of collective will in modern human history. In 1960, Dubai was a small trading port on the Persian Gulf with a population of roughly 40,000 people. There were no skyscrapers, no highways, no international airport handling 90 million passengers a year. There was a creek, some fishing boats, a pearl diving industry in slow decline, and a great deal of sand. The oil came. But here's what most people get wrong about Dubai's story. The oil didn't last long enough to explain what Dubai became. Abu Dhabi, its neighbor, sits on one of the largest oil reserves on Earth. Dubai's oil reserves were always modest by Gulf standards, and by the 1980s, Dubai's leadership understood with unusual clarity that the oil would run out. The question was what to replace it with, and the answer Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum arrived at was audacious to the point of seeming delusional. Replace it with everything. Make Dubai a global hub for finance, trade, tourism, aviation, logistics, and luxury. Make it a city that the world needed to pass through, do business in, and dream about visiting. Build the infrastructure not for the Dubai that existed, but for the Dubai that was being imagined. The timeline of what followed is almost difficult to process. Emirates Airline was founded in 1985 with 2 aircraft and a borrowed $10 million.
Reports suggest that amongst them are nearly 250,000 Britons who live in the United Arab Emirates.
Today, it operates one of the largest long-haul fleets on Earth and connects Dubai to virtually every major city in the world. Jebel Ali Port became one of the busiest container ports on the planet. The financial free zones attracted global banks, law firms, and tech companies with zero corporate tax and a legal framework designed specifically to make international business frictionless. And then came the landmarks. The Burj Al Arab opened in 1999, a sail-shaped hotel built on its own artificial island, positioning itself as the world's only 7-star hotel and immediately becoming the most recognizable building in the Middle East. The Palm Jumeirah broke ground in 2001. The Burj Khalifa topped out in 2009 at 828 meters, a full 300 meters taller than anything else on Earth at the time. The Dubai Mall, the Dubai Frame, the Museum of the Future, each one a calculated act of spectacle, each one designed not merely to function but to photograph, to be shared, discussed, and aspired to by people who had never visited and now desperately wanted to. It worked. By God, it worked. Dubai became the 4th most visited city on Earth. International tourists arrived in numbers that would have seemed like science fiction to anyone standing in that 1960 port town. Luxury brands queued up to open flagship stores. Global celebrities performed, invested, bought apartments. The city became shorthand for a specific kind of ambition, the belief that if you build something extraordinary enough, the world will come. For at least 2 decades, the world did. But here's the thing about building a dream at that speed and that scale. The dream requires constant maintenance. And maintenance, in a city built on perception as much as infrastructure, is a more fragile business than it looks from the 148th floor. Dubai's quiet shift. It didn't announce itself. That's the thing. There was no single moment where someone flipped a switch and Dubai felt different. No crisis, no catastrophe, no front-page breaking point. It was quieter than that. More like the feeling you get when you return to a place you loved years ago and realize, slowly, that something you can't quite name has gone out of it. Ask anyone who has spent significant time in Dubai in the last few years, and they'll describe it in similar ways. Not collapsed, not failing, just quieter in places where there used to be noise. Walk through the Gold Souk on a weekday afternoon in the off-season and count the vendors sitting idle in their stalls, watching their phones, waiting for customers who are taking longer to arrive than they used to. Must visit the stretch of beach clubs along JBR, the Jumeirah Beach residence, that were once the defining image of Dubai nightlife, and notice how many have cycled through names and concepts, opening and closing and reinventing themselves with a frequency that suggests the formula is harder to crack than it looks. Talk to the people who actually run the city day to day. Not the executives in the glass towers, the taxi drivers. In Dubai, taxi drivers are an education. They come from everywhere: Pakistan, India, Egypt, the Philippines, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, and they have been watching this city from the driver's seat, 12 hours a day, for years. Talk to them honestly, and you hear a version of Dubai that doesn't appear in the tourism campaigns. Before COVID, every night was busy, one driver explains. I'm navigating the elevated highway toward the marina. Every hotel is full, every restaurant full. Now some nights I drive 2 hours and get only 1 or 2 passengers. The tourists still come, but something is different. They spend less, they stay shorter. A hotel concierge at a 5-star property on Sheikh Zayed Road, speaking on condition of anonymity, describes watching the guest profile of his hotel shift noticeably over the past 3 years. We used to have many long-stay guests. Business travelers who would stay 2-3 weeks at a time while working on deals. That has become less. Now it is more short visits. 3 nights, 4 nights, in and out. The feel of the hotel is different. These are not catastrophic statements. They are not the words of people describing a city in crisis. But they carry something. A note of unease. I sense that the trajectory has changed in ways that aren't yet visible in the headline numbers, but are absolutely visible to the people living inside the experience every day. The social media layer adds another dimension. Dubai has always been a photogenic city, almost aggressively so, because so much of it was designed with the camera in mind. But the content that goes viral about Dubai now is different from what it was 5 years ago. Alongside the sunrise photos from the Burj and the infinity pool shots and the supercar videos, there is a growing counter-narrative. Empty malls, quiet streets, abandoned construction projects, videos captioned with versions of, "Is Dubai actually overhyped?" These videos get millions of views. They generate arguments in the comments. They reach people who are in the early stages of deciding whether Dubai belongs on their travel list. And in a city where perception is infrastructure, where the image of the dream is as important as the dream itself, that shift in the social media conversation is not a small thing. Dubai's hidden pressures. Here is where the story gets genuinely complicated and genuinely human. Because the most significant pressures on Dubai right now are not visible from the Burj Khalifa observation deck. They live in the spreadsheets of middle-class families sitting around kitchen tables trying to make the numbers work. They show up in WhatsApp groups where expats share information about which neighborhoods have become unaffordable and which schools still have space. They exist in the quiet exodus that doesn't make headlines because it happens one family at a time. Dubai's cost of living has risen sharply and persistently over the past several years. Residential rents, which were already high by any international comparison, increased by an average of 20 to 26% in 2023 alone, according to property market reports from firms including CBRE and Azteco. In certain premium neighborhoods, Dubai Marina, Downtown, JBR, Palm Jumeirah, the increases have been even steeper. A two-bedroom apartment that rented for 90,000 dirhams annually in 2020 may now command 160,000 dirhams or more for the same space. For Dubai's enormous expat middle class, the teachers, the nurses, the mid-level managers, the small business owners, this is not an abstraction. Now, it is a monthly calculation that is becoming increasingly difficult to resolve in Dubai's favor. The city's fundamental proposition to this group has always been, accept the heat, accept the lack of permanent residency, accept being far from home, and in return, live well. Save money. Enjoy a standard of living your home country can't offer at your salary level. When the rent eats most of the salary advantage, that proposition starts to fail. The departures are real. LinkedIn is full of posts from professionals announcing their relocation from Dubai to Lisbon, to Kuala Lumpur, to Tbilisi, to cities that have emerged as alternative hubs for the globally mobile worker. The digital nomad visa, ironically introduced by the UAE in 2021 to attract location-independent professionals, and has also made it easier for those same professionals to realize they don't need to be specifically in Dubai. They can be anywhere. And anywhere increasingly includes places that are cheaper, cooler, and offer a path to eventual citizenship. The heat deserves its own paragraph, because this is the part of Dubai's story that is quietly, irreversibly worsening. Dubai's summer temperatures have always been extreme. June through September has historically meant daytime highs of 40 to 45 degrees Celsius, humidity that makes the air feel physical, and a general understanding that outdoor life simply stops for 3 months of the year. Residents and experienced visitors adapt. You move between air-conditioned spaces. You go outdoors before 7 a.m. or after 9 p.m. You accept the limitation. But climate data is making this picture darker. The studies published in journals including Nature Climate Change have suggested that Gulf cities like Dubai face some of the most severe projected heat increases of any urban areas on Earth under continued warming scenarios. The extreme summer is, by all available evidence, getting more extreme. In April 2024, Dubai experienced rainfall of 254 millimeters in a single 24-hour period, equivalent to nearly 2 years of average annual rainfall, causing flooding that overwhelmed drainage infrastructure, disrupted Dubai International Airport for days, and generated images that traveled around the world. Not images of luxury, images of submerged supercars, flooded malls, highways turned into rivers. The flooding was a natural event, but its impact was amplified by the nature of Dubai's infrastructure. A city built for sun and speed, not for water. The drainage systems were not designed for rainfall events of that magnitude because such events were historically vanishingly rare. The images cracked something in the global perception of Dubai as a city that has engineered its way past nature's limitations. For workers at the bottom of Dubai's labor structure, the construction workers, the cleaners, the delivery drivers, the domestic helpers, the picture has always been harder than the skyline suggests. Reports from human rights organizations over many years have documented issues around wage theft, passport confiscation, and dangerously hot working conditions. The UAE government has introduced reforms, including a mandatory midday work ban during summer months. But enforcement is uneven, and the fundamental economics of the kafala sponsorship system, that which ties workers' legal status to their employer, remain a source of genuine vulnerability for hundreds of thousands of people who help maintain the city these workers built and yet cannot freely leave. None of this is the Dubai of the brochures. All of it is the Dubai that exists beneath the brochures, and increasingly, in an era of radical transparency and instant global information sharing, the gap between those two Dubais is harder to maintain. Dubai's global competition. While Dubai was managing its internal pressures, the world it had been competing in
pressures to regional instability, Dubai faced significant headwinds, but the Emirates and the Emiratis are trying to script a rebound story built on unity and confidence.
Was quietly, fundamentally reorganizing itself. When Dubai made its big play for global tourism in the 1990s and 2000s, the competition was relatively limited. Long-haul luxury tourism meant Paris, New York, London, the Maldives, and maybe Hong Kong or Singapore if you were headed east. Dubai positioned itself as the glamorous middle option, equidistant from Europe and Asia, connected to everywhere by Emirates, offering the spectacle of extreme modernity in a place that most Western travelers had never been. The novelty alone was part of the product. That novelty is gone. And the competition it has been replaced by is fierce in ways that Dubai's early strategists could not have fully anticipated. Southeast Asia has emerged as arguably the most dynamic tourism region on Earth. Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines offer combinations of natural beauty, cultural richness, culinary depth, and relative affordability that attract the exact demographic, young, globally mobile, experience-hungry travelers that Dubai has been trying to capture. Bali alone receives millions of visitors annually.
More than 60,000 tourists arrive daily, adding to a population of 4.2 million. Bali welcomed over 6.3 million foreign visitors last year alone.
From the same European and Australian source markets that Dubai targets. And Bali offers something Dubai fundamentally cannot: the feeling of encountering a culture that grew organically from its landscape over centuries. This is the authenticity gap. And it matters more than the tourism industry traditionally admitted. A significant and growing segment of the global traveler population, particularly millennials and Gen Z, has developed a specific allergy to manufactured experience. They can feel the difference between a city that evolved and a city that was installed. They respond differently to streets that developed their character over generations compared to streets that were master-planned by consultants. Dubai is, by design, the most manufactured city on Earth. And that was its genius. For a long time, the sheer audacity of the manufacturing was itself a draw. But as that demographic segment grows in spending power, the preference for places that feel real, however you define real, creates a structural headwind for Dubai that no amount of new attractions can entirely neutralize. Europe's revival as a tourism powerhouse has added another layer of complexity. Post-pandemic, cities like Lisbon, Athens, Tbilisi, and Tirana emerged as hotspots for exactly the travelers who might previously have defaulted to Dubai. These cities offer history, character, food culture, walkability, and a growing infrastructure of boutique hotels and design-forward hospitality at price points that make Dubai look eye-watering. The rise of remote work has allowed people to spend weeks in these cities rather than just passing through, which means they compete not just for the tourism dollar, but for the long-stay, high-spend visitor that cities like Dubai need. Then there is geopolitics. Dubai has always positioned itself as neutral ground, a place where business gets done regardless of who you are or where you come from. That neutrality is genuinely part of its value proposition. Deals are made in Dubai between parties who could not easily meet anywhere else. That is real. That is powerful. But neutrality is harder to maintain in a world that is polarizing rapidly. The Russia-Ukraine conflict placed Dubai in a complicated position.
Ukrainian representatives report to me almost every hour they are now in the Emirates, where Ukrainian, American, and Russian delegations are meeting today. There has already been a conversation. This is important because there have not been such trilateral meetings for a long time.
The UAE chose not to impose Western sanctions on Russia. They and Dubai became a notable destination for Russian capital and Russian nationals after 2022. This brought genuine economic activity. It also brought diplomatic friction with Western governments and a reputational conversation that Dubai would rather not be having. The city's famous political neutrality, which had always felt like a feature, began to feel in some quarters like a risk. The traveler mindset has shifted too, in ways that are difficult to quantify but impossible to ignore. In 2008, posting a photo from Atlantis or the Burj was a statement. It said something clear about your life and your achievements. In 2024, the conversation around conspicuous luxury travel has grown genuinely complicated. The aesthetics of wealth have shifted. The Instagram generation that drove so much of Dubai's tourism growth in the early 2010s has aged. It changed its values and in many cases grown skeptical of exactly the kind of performed luxury that Dubai does better than almost anywhere. The city is, in a very real sense, competing with a cultural shift that has no obvious solution. The turning point. Every city that has ever built itself on a powerful image eventually faces a moment when the image and the reality diverge visibly enough that the gap cannot be quietly managed. Dubai's version of that moment didn't arrive as a single earthquake. It arrived as a series of smaller tremors, each one adding to the accumulated stress on the foundations of the dream. The April 2024 floods were perhaps the most dramatic. The images were staggering in their incongruity. Lamborghinis stalled in knee-deep water, luxury hotels issuing instructions to guests about evacuation routes. Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest in the world, grounded for hours as terminals flooded. The videos spread globally within hours, generating a specific kind of commentary that was harder for Dubai to absorb than ordinary criticism. Because the floods didn't suggest that Dubai was poor or corrupt or mismanaged in conventional ways, they suggested something more unsettling, that the engineering confidence that underpinned the entire Dubai project, the idea that enough money and enough ambition could permanently solve any problem, including the problems that nature presents, had limits that were now becoming visible. A city that had sold itself as the future suddenly looked, for a few vivid days, like a place that the future was happening to, rather than a place confidently building it. The perception conversation had been building for years before that. In 2023, a series of high-profile social media creators published content about their Dubai experiences that cut against the official narrative in ways that resonated specifically because the creators weren't hostile, they were disappointed. Their videos weren't about poverty or injustice. They were about the feeling of arriving somewhere you'd dreamed about and finding that the reality, while impressive, didn't quite reach the altitude of the expectation. That's a subtle but devastating critique for a city whose entire competitive advantage rests on exceeding expectations. The expat exit conversation went mainstream in a way it hadn't previously. LinkedIn posts from senior professionals announcing they were leaving Dubai, and, crucially, on explaining why, began to circulate widely enough that they reached people who had never considered moving there. The reasons cited were consistent: rent, heat, the absence of a long-term civic identity, the feeling of being a temporary participant in someone else's project rather than a genuine stakeholder in a shared community. That last point is perhaps the deepest crack in the foundation. Dubai has always been a city of people who came from somewhere else. That has been its superpower, a cosmopolitan energy, a work ethic drawn from dozens of nationalities, a cultural dynamism that purely homogeneous cities cannot replicate. But it has also meant that Dubai has never quite developed the sense of rooted community that makes cities genuinely resilient. When the financial calculus changes, people leave. Not because they don't care about Dubai, but because Dubai was never quite designed to make them stay if the numbers stopped working. And in 2024, for a growing number of people, the numbers have stopped working. What Dubai really represents here is where I want to step back from the specific and say something about the general. Because Dubai's story isn't just about Dubai. Dubai is the purest expression of a specific idea about how to build prosperity in the modern world. The idea that you can engineer your way to significance, that you can manufacture desirability, that if you build the infrastructure of a dream boldly enough, the dream will sustain itself indefinitely. For decades, that idea worked. The world came, the money followed, the skyline kept climbing. But then came April 16th, 2024. In less than 24 hours, Dubai received 259.5 millimeters of rainfall. To put that in perspective, That is more than the city typically sees in an entire year. The infrastructure of the most engineered city on Earth simply could not absorb it. Tunnels became rivers. The Sheikh Zayed Road, the main artery of the city,
Sheikh Zayed Road, is part of the development of Business Bay. This was done in the mid-2000s.
the highway that runs past the glass towers and the luxury hotels, flooded to the point where cars were abandoned mid-lane. Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest international airport by passenger volume, descended into chaos. Flights were canceled, diverted, delayed. Passengers slept on terminal floors. Videos of submerged Ferraris and flooded five-star hotel lobbies traveled around the world within hours. The images were striking not because they showed poverty or mismanagement in a conventional sense. They were striking because of what they revealed about the nature of the Dubai project itself. A city built for sunshine had not been built for rain. The drainage infrastructure was not designed for this because, historically, events of this magnitude were essentially impossible in this climate. But climate is no longer historical. Scientists at institutions including MIT and the Max Planck Institute have published research indicating that extreme precipitation events in the Arabian Peninsula are becoming more frequent and more severe as global temperatures rise. What happened in April 2024 may not be an anomaly. It may be a preview. And here is where Dubai's story connects to something much larger than itself. In 2023, the UAE hosted COP28, the United Nations Climate Conference, right here in Dubai. Then world leaders gathered in a city built on oil wealth to negotiate the future of a planet destabilized by the burning of that oil. The conference produced what was called the UAE Consensus, a landmark agreement calling for a transition away from fossil fuels. It was a genuine diplomatic achievement. It was also, inescapably, one of the great ironies of our era. The city that most perfectly embodies the age of carbon-fueled ambition, hosting the conversation about how to survive what that ambition has produced. 6 months after COP28 ended, those same streets flooded. You cannot write that. Life wrote it. What this tells us is something important about the limits of engineering as philosophy. Dubai proved that you can build anything. That given sufficient resources and sufficient will, you can turn desert into metropolis, create islands in open sea, build the tallest building on Earth, run an airline that connects every corner of the globe. The engineering is real, and it is extraordinary. But you cannot engineer away consequence. You cannot air condition the future. You cannot build a drainage system deep enough to redirect the bill that eventually arrives for choices made at civilizational scale. Dubai is not declining, but it is standing at a threshold that every great constructed dream eventually reaches. The moment when ambition alone is no longer enough. When the question shifts from what can we build to something harder, something more honest. What are we actually building this for? And who does it need to work for next? That answer will define not just Dubai's next chapter. It will say something about all of us. Dubai has always been a city of extremes, light and shadow, ambition and risk, audacity and consequence. The skyline dazzles, but the streets whisper a different story. What will happen when the dream confronts reality? Can a city built on possibility reinvent itself without losing the magic that made it matter in the first place? The answer isn't in the headlines, the Instagram posts, or even the towers that scrape the sky. It's in what comes next, and right now, that story is still being written.